Well, welcome back. We are now going to move to a panel discussion, the first panel of today's programme. This is the PPP Leaders Panel, and we're going to look at regional PPP projects, opportunities and challenges in a sort of country-by-country session. So we have a fantastic group of panelists for this conversation. And if you're with us for Ziad Hayek's opening remarks, you will have heard him talk about Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia as key markets for PPP. And Ziad talked about in Jordan the legislative changes, and in Egypt the legislative changes to create more flexible legal frameworks, and in Saudi Arabia the pipeline of PPP and privatization efforts. So perfectly, we have on this panel, we have Mahmoud Al-Qashem, who is the advisor to the Prime Minister of Jordan and the head of the national PPP program in Jordan. We also have Hani Al-Saig, who is the Director General for Strategic Communications and Marketing Services for the National Centre for Privatization in Saudi Arabia, the region's biggest market, and probably the market where we're seeing the fastest acceleration of PPP opportunities. David Moore has just joined us. David is a partner covering the project and infrastructure team and the managing partner for Abu Dhabi at CMS. Welcome, David. It's great to have you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. And we will shortly be joined by engineer Attar Hanura, who's the director of the PPP Central Unit at the Ministry of Finance in Egypt. And Egypt, as I mentioned, was one of the countries also highlighted by Ziad this morning in the opening address. Okay, I'm going to come to Hani Al-Saig first. Hani is the Director General of Strategic Communications and Marketing Services at the NCP in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the biggest market in this region, the biggest economy in this region, and has probably, arguably, the most ambitious, economic reform and vision agenda of any country. And the National Centre for Privatization is right at the heart of the Vision 2030 programme, bringing in the private sector to deliver efficiencies and investment into the state sector in the kingdom. So, Hani, thank you very much for joining us today. It's fantastic to have you with us. Could you perhaps start just by setting out for a few minutes, just tell us a little bit about what is going on with the NCP and the PPP agenda in Saudi Arabia, and then perhaps elaborate on something where you see the sort of pipeline of opportunities, maybe some of the obstacles as well.
Well, good morning to you and to all the viewers and listeners out there. Thanks for giving us this opportunity. We're always excited about being able to shed some light on what we're doing. So just, I guess, to give you a little bit of an idea, the NCP has been around for about 3 years now, a little bit over 3 years. Over the last 3 years, we've been very, very busy in making sure that we have the right playing field, let's say, for all stakeholders. Making sure that there is a there is a regulatory environment that entices investors to come in and supports them. That we have a solid pipeline that we can offer both local and international markets. We put together a very, very good team of experts, where both internally and with advisors. We have created what we think is a very strong system of institutional capacity. We've introduced something called the supervisory committees, which today they act as bodies outside the ministries, but they take ownership of the actual sectors as far as privatization and PPP goes. So we've been able, and we've taken in NCP, we've taken the role of being the advisor and the supporter of the system. So we're sort of the overseer of the ecosystem around PPPs and privatization. So far, we've launched, like you said, it's like I said in the beginning, we have a very, very long and big and large pipeline. So I think we've launched around 25 transactions or so. We today live, I think we have about 14. We've closed around 11. Most of those are PPPs, except 3 that we've closed were actually were asset sales. One was a medical center, and 2 were the flower company. So we have a good variety. We have a variety of about 13 sectors today that we work with. Under the 13 sectors, there are different channels or different opportunities. We have let's say a pipeline of about 100 or so opportunities or initiatives. But the live ones that will materialize, that we hope will materialize over the next 3 years, are a little bit over around 50 or so. The majority are PPPs. There is a very, very large pipeline in water, in health. Transportation is coming online very, very soon, hopefully. We have in education and social development also. So we do have a very diverse sectors or diverse opportunities out there to cater to a large number of different types of investors.
Well, Hani, thank you for that. So congratulations on the past 3 years. It's been it's from a standing start. It's an impressive journey, and you've just said there's a pipeline or a program planned of around 100 PPP or privatization initiatives under the umbrella of the National Centre for Privatization. So, and about 50 of those are in action at the moment, from what you just said. Can you give me any indication about the nature of that 50 or the 100? Is it mostly a one-size-fits-all in terms of the PPP element? Is there a standard contract or a standard model, or does it vary from sector to sector? Schools are different from roads, or different from something else. How are these things being packaged up?
Okay, first of all, it can't be one size fits all, because there are different types of transactions, different industries and different sectors. So if we're talking about infrastructure, then it's a little bit different than social infrastructure, then it's a little bit different than maybe other types of other sectors. The different types of risks, whether it's an offtake, whether it's government risk, market risk, and all that, and risk distributions, those tell us that we can't put everything in just one big standard pile or one. So no, it's sort of customized per type of transaction and per type. But there is an overshadowing umbrella on top of them as far as regulatory goes. We're working on the PPP law that we hope will come out soon, and that will give guidance and structure to the ecosystem. But what it actually do, because the current laws and regulations today, they do provide the necessary support, and historically that's been proven. But this will add a lot more support to that element of especially contractual and the legal element. The other is we have a project manual that's been approved, and we have a number of other tools that are in place, all available on our website for anyone to take a look at, that help within that area.
Okay, Hani, thank you for that. Now, as I mentioned, the National Centre for Privatization, this is Hani's organization. They're responsible for the PPP and privatization agenda in Saudi Arabia, which is right at the heart of Vision 2030 and the economic development program. If you have questions for Hani or any of the other panelists, please feel free to send them in. You can use the chat tab, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will field those questions. I mean, the program and the ambitions of the National Centre for Privatization are phenomenal. You know, it's a really important agenda for the region. Great opportunities, but I'm sure you all have lots of questions. So send in your questions for Hani using that chat tab in the right-hand corner of your screen. So Hani, thank you for that. I'm going to move now to Jordan, to Mahmoud. We lost you briefly, Mahmoud Al-Khoshem, earlier, but you're back. Thank you very much for coming back. I was a little bit concerned. Now, Jordan has had a PPP and a privatization program for a very long time. Obviously, the economics of Jordan are different to, say, Saudi Arabia or the UAE. It's not an oil economy in the way they are. And we heard Ziad Hayek singling out Jordan this morning, talking about its, the steps that it has taken in its legislative structures, creating a dynamic legal framework for PPP. Can you tell us a bit about where Jordan is currently, in terms of pipeline of PPP projects, in terms of the institutional framework, but also in terms of attracting investors? Because it's a competitive place. You're competing with, Saudi, the UAE, Egypt. So, perhaps if you could just paint a picture for us about the Jordan situation.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Jordan, as I basically mentioned in earlier discussions, had a long history with privatization and PPP. And since early 2000s, we had an executive privatization commission that was basically eliminated in 2013. It has basically done tens of privatization, and there was an evaluation for the process. That evaluation resulted in issuing 2014's PPP law under the Ministry of Finance. Now, for 5 years at the Ministry of Finance, PPP did not take off simply because there were some problems with the law that was enacted in 2014. Now, in 2019, and following London Conference, which is an international conference to support Jordan, a new complete set of policy, law, and bylaws have basically been organized. I joined a year ago, and there was a policy that was established, and the policy linked PPP with 2 other important elements of the planning process. One, we call it the planning of the public investment, and that's the Ministry of Planning. So they created something called public investment management structure at the Ministry of Planning, and that's basically to screen and be a gatekeeper for the quality of the project entering in. And on the other side, they created the FCCL, which is the Fiscal Commitment and Contingency Liability Unit at the Ministry of Finance, and that's primarily in charge of fiscal affordability. So we need to look at the project from affordability point of view. In the middle, the law established the PPP Center at the Prime Minister office. So we have prepared a state-of-the-art law, a very modern law that was enacted back in April, came into effect. Simultaneously to the enactment process, we have prepared 8 bylaws and instruction, which are now going for the final approval at the Legislation Bureau. This package is organizing how the government is going to manage the process of issuing, bidding, awarding, and closing PPP projects. So we have now a complete regulatory framework. We are in the middle of setting up an administrative structure. Now we have a change of government yesterday, so now we need to see how the new government will tackle the PPP. But it's been basically in His Majesty's letter to the new Prime Minister, he highlighted PPP as a top priority. So PPP is taking center stage in the economic development in Jordan. Now, on the project side,
can I ask, Mahmoud? I'm sorry to interrupt you there. So you've described the sort of the institutional framework that you have been working on to create, and that is now in place. What about the pipeline of projects? So Ziad Hayek, when he was talking this morning, he said one of the most important things he thought for investors was to have visibility of a pipeline. what is the sort of pipeline in Jordan for projects and other PPPs?
Okay, I would say we have three categories of projects now. We have the project they have the project that have structured transaction advisory services. We have 4 projects that we have the IFC and other firms as the transaction advisor. Those have been in preparation for a while. Now they are about to go to the market. They were basically, COVID-19, in fact, delayed us because of the mobility of people and because of basically giving attention to more pressing issues. We have another 6 or 7 projects that are awaiting now hiring transaction advisors. As we all agree as professionals in this field, without a top-notch transaction advisors led by a financial advisor with strong legal and technical, the chance that a project will go to financial close is very slim. So for that purpose, the new PPP system in Jordan established the Project Development Fund. And this fund, the initial budget for it is $30 million funded by donors with the aim of hiring top-notch advisors to lead these transactions. Because we all know government institutions and government employees don't usually have the capacity to manage these complex projects. So we have 10 projects of about $9.5 billion value are basically either a transaction advisor is about to offer them in the market or a transaction advisor is about to come into the show. On the other hand, because of COVID-19, also we came up with a set of new proposals that the new government will look at. These are related to health and education and employment. I can talk about them later on.
Well, thank you, Mahmoud. You've touched on a lot of points there that I will come back to, and I wanted to ask all of the panelists about the impact of COVID. So I will come back to that. And just to let you know, we've had some questions that have come in. I will come to those in a moment once we've spoken to each of the panelists as well. David Moore, if I can come to you. So Mahmoud was talking just now about the need for capacity, advisors on PPP. So it seems like a good opportunity to come to you. Perhaps you can tell us, tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing at CMS in the PPP arena and where you see the kind of the capacity gaps, perhaps, and some of the other issues that you've seen for PPP in the region.
Right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm a partner at CMS. CMS is the world's 5th largest law firm, and we've done a lot of PPPs. So I think we've done over 300 PPPs. In the region, we're working on PPPs. I mean, I focus on transport. So, for example, I'm part of a transaction advisory consortium working on the new causeway between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. As for the gaps in what the sort of transaction advisory market can provide, to be honest, I'm not sure if there are any other gaps. I mean, the people who are sort of congregated in the Middle East tend to have come from other markets, which have had vibrant and markets, lots of PPPs. So they've moved from those markets as those markets have become quieter, as indeed I have, and they're sort of congregating here. So I mean, I'll be interested in the thoughts of others, but I wouldn't say there are any particular gaps in the services that the transaction advisory market can provide.
So I was meaning more, what's your perception about the gaps within the governments that are seeking to deliver and utilize PPP? So Mahmoud talked about the need for advisors in the Jordan market. Is that?
Yes.
We've talked for years about the need to build that capacity up to with units.
Yes, I mean, I think yes. So I completely agree. I mean, having a strong client, a sensible client, I think is essential. We've all been involved in projects where clients are very keen to get out to the market. They don't really know what they're doing, and they go out far too quickly. The bidders get frustrated by that. The thing drags on, and it's not a successful project. And I mean, unfortunately, countries, and Saudi is a very good example of this, have addressed that. So Saudi has put in place a very credible program and regime, and it's a very attractive market as a consequence. I mean, if you go to the airport on a Sunday morning, you can see that they have strong structures. They have a good legal regime which is getting better. There's a pipeline, which is of course very attractive. So it's got all the ingredients of what I think makes a good PPP market. Now, Saudi is a sort of shining example. That's not replicated everywhere, and I think others can learn from that, and others are following. So clearly, Abu Dhabi is a good market. Has also putting out fairly recently put in place ADIO, its sort of PPP unit, and putting in place the laws it needs. So that's another good market. But as I say, that is not replicated everywhere, and I think they will. Those countries will struggle. And
is it your sense, David, that Ziad Hayek, when he was talking this morning, so he is the president of the World Association of PPP Units, he said that one of the obstacles in the past has been the sort of political will to sort of push ahead with PPP. There's a kind of a sense that you're handing over the state assets to the private sector, and there's politics in that. Is it your sense that has now changed, that the impact of COVID and even the lower oil prices over the past few years has changed that dynamic? And there is now, and Saudi is a great example, I think, there's that kind of push from the top to get ahead with this stuff. And actually, Mahmoud also just mentioned it with the new government in Amman, with the king putting in his letter that the PPP is at the top of the agenda. Is it now an important priority?
I think yes. I mean, I agree. Historically, that has been a big problem. People don't like the private sector coming in and operating their hospitals or roads or whatever. People have been very suspicious of that. I mean, clearly Saudi has gone way past that, and Saudi has no problem with it. And that, I would say this, wouldn't I? But that makes perfect sense to me. I think there are various hurdles, actually. I mean, that's one, and Saudi's obviously got beyond that. Another, I think, is that people see PPP as a form of magic. So if you want something to be delivered and you can't afford it, PPP will deliver it. Now, clearly, PPP involves financing, but the scheme has to be financially stable on its own terms. So the money has to come from somewhere. So transport, for example, what I do, if you're looking to fund a PPP, a transport PPP, you can rely on the revenue it may generate, the toll revenue or the tickets, whatever it is, access charges. But typically that won't be sufficient. And so other money will be required. And some countries just don't seem to understand that. And that is, I think, is a huge impediment as well.
Okay. And final question before I come back.
Yes, I'm there.
We have Engineer Attar Hanuri, you have joined us. Welcome. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi, Attar. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So welcome. I'm delighted that you've been able to join us. We're just we're having the we're going around the panelists for their opening comments. David Moore from CMS is just talking, and then I will come to you in just a moment if you can bear with us for a couple of minutes. David, just one final question before I come to your Attar Hanura. Where do you see the biggest kind of barrier, if you like, to the private sector investors coming into PPP? So you've set out, that you see the government, the client side has changed and set up institutions to deliver a pipeline of PPP. What about from the private side? What's missing, if anything, from the investment point of view?
Well, again, practice varies across the region, but I think the comments from Hani at the beginning, I think, were music to the ears of investors. I mean, what they want is a pipeline. Clearly, investors are mobile. You could invest in a project in Indonesia, in Brazil, in Canada, or Middle East. And if there's one project coming up, then you're probably not going to go for that. So having a pipeline, I think, is essential. Having a stable legal structure, of course, is sensible. People want to know that they're going to invest in something and that having done so, they can get their money back. So they're going to want to know that it's, for example, there's a transparent procurement process and that there's a law in place that renders PPPs legal and they're legal in the sector in which you're doing it. And that if government support is required, that government support is available, and so on. And also they will want to deal with a sensible client who understands where the private sector is coming from and who wants to come up with a balanced position. I mean, PPPs can create a 30-year relationship. So it has to be something which will work for the term of the 30 years. And having something which you might describe as a Rambo position at the beginning, which, you know, looks very, very attractive, is probably going to unravel quite quickly because it just won't be deliverable, or something will go wrong. So it's really about creating a long-term relationship between the private sector and the public sector. And people who understand that, I think, will prosper.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So we have a few questions that have come in. Please continue to send your questions in using the tabs on the right-hand side of the screen. But I'm delighted that we've been joined by Engineer Attar Hanura, who is the Director of the PPP Central Unit at the Ministry of Finance in Egypt. Attar, thank you very much for making. I was worried that we weren't going to see you today, so I'm sorry for any technical challenges, and thank you for persevering. If you could just set out, you know, Egypt has had a PPP program for some time and has had quite a lot of success. Where is Egypt's PPP program today? And perhaps what are your plans for the next 12, 24 months in terms of pipeline?
The sound is keeping on breaking.
Okay, I will repeat. Where is Egypt's PPP today? And what is the pipeline? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. The situation, the PPP sector in Egypt now, actually we are having a very big, let me say, political support and political willingness for implementation of a lot of infrastructure projects. You know that there was a gap, there is a gap between the existing infrastructure and the required infrastructure. Plus, in the last 6 years, there was a lot of expansions in new cities in the North Coast, in the Upper Egypt, and at different areas. So this means that the need for more infrastructure is there. In the last 5 or 6 years, there was a boom in the bridges and roads and the highways that shifted Egypt a lot ahead in the doing business. There is a big infrastructure required, and there is a mandate from the political side, the Prime Minister and the President, to have the PPP have a big role in this infrastructure and participation of the private sector. For more than one reason, which were known for everybody: the quality of service the private sector is giving, the freedom and maneuver that the private sector have compared to the public sector, and the capital investment that the government or the treasury cannot support all this kind of funding for the ambitious plans. We have in different
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me, Attar.
Awarded.
Can you hear me, Attar? We're having some disruption to your signal. If you could just repeat the last comment you were making, you got cut off temporarily. I think we may have lost Attar Hanura for the moment. Attar, if you can hear me, I will move on to some of the questions that have come in, and we will bring you back in once we restore the connection. Hani, if I can come back to you in Saudi Arabia, we've had a question that has been submitted. What is the current timeline for the launch of the PPP law? And is there any early insights you could provide on the market? So I don't know if this is your area of activity or not, but can you tell us a little bit about the status of the PPP law in Saudi Arabia?
Sure. Okay. It was issued for public consultation about a little bit over a year ago, and it's taking its path within the process of being approved as a law. As everyone knows, for something like this to become a law and approved, there is a very, let's say, stringent process, because this is something that will be on it'll affect a lot of different stakeholders. So just saying that, it's probably hopefully within the second half of the approval process, probably. So we're looking hopefully within the next couple of months, several months. Hopefully it'll be approved. Once it's out, we'll be issuing. We'll publicize it and publish it on our website, and it'll be available for everyone to take a look at.
Can I just ask, is the PPP law, is that needed? Is that a requirement before you can?
Not at all. Not to cut you off, but look, I mean, we've had a very successful pipeline of PPPs since 2003, even before. And before that, there were asset sale privatizations that started even in the early 70s, or early to mid 70s. So today, that law that we're looking at is more of a support to the existing framework. If you look at the IWPP, IPP transactions that were launched since 2003, all the way up to now, I guess. We have some of the largest water and power producing assets in the world that were a result of those PPPs. We have an airport, at least one airport in the kingdom that was done on a PPP basis. So we've had transactions in the past that were done, but this will be more of a support. It will add, I guess, a little bit more, make the system a little bit more robust. Give people a little bit more confidence, or investors a little bit more confidence.
Okay, thank you. And if I can just come to David on the same point. So the role of the PPP law, Hani has just said it's not an essential requirement, and other countries, around the world have proceeded with PPP without a law. What difference does it make from a lawyer's point of view? Is it actually quite a big difference, or is it just a confidence building measure?
No, I think it's quite a big difference. I mean, clearly Saudi already has a good PPP market, and it has been doing projects. It's got the government tenders and procurement law. It's had 2 of those now, and so it's possible to get to a position where you can have a legally robust project. But I think we'll all be very pleased to see the new PSP law, because it'll just simplify things. I mean, it sort of disapplies the government tenders and procurement law, so it's clear what applies. It's clear what sectors it applies to. It'll be clear that government support will be required. It's just sort of it's designed for the purpose, if you like. So it'll make life easier for everyone, and it should help what is already a good market, I think.
Okay, and Mahmoud, if I can come to you on a slightly different topic. You mentioned in your opening remarks about the pipeline of about 10 PPPs that are being planned in Jordan. Is there somewhere a calendar for when the sort of scheduling for those 10, and how do people find out about them? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just unmuted. Basically, we have some of the projects were scheduled for this year. One of the projects was offered for expression of interest back in June. And basically, there was some delay related to internal housekeeping in the government, I would say. But today, we have 4 projects that they should come into the market, because the transaction advisors are finalizing them. They should come to the market as soon as early next year. Now, the other project that will require transaction advisors, there was terms of reference prepared for 4 project transaction advisors, and those also they should, before the end of the year, hire transaction advisors. So that's basically the timeline that we are hoping for. Now, changes happening in the government sometimes delay things. Reprioritization. Now we need to, on Thursday, I have a meeting to basically agree on a new calendar, and I hope we can have a more credible calendar for this project.
Thank you, Mahmoud. I think we have Engineer Hanura back on the line. Can you hear me, Attar?
No, it's much more better quality now. I can hear you and see you.
Excellent. Welcome back. I'm sorry for the technical interruptions. You were speaking about in Egypt what the need for infrastructure and the mandate from the top down to use PPP. So the sort of the building blocks are in place. Can you tell us a little bit about the plans, the pipeline for PPP in Egypt, in the next year or two? What are the priority projects?
We have a pipeline now. However, this pipeline will be a little bit moving or changed within the next 2 months, because we are refreshing with the all the line ministries that are working on the infrastructure and public utilities and public services in Egypt. So to refreshing their the next 5 years plan. So within the next 2 months, we'll do all the kind of initial screening to enrich our pipeline. But as we are talking now, we have in the transportation sector, we have dry ports. We are already finished the first and awarded the first dry port in 6th of October City, which is one of the big industrial areas in Egypt. And the second one, we already finished the feasibility study, and we expect to push it to the market or tender it within the next 2 months. By November, December, we will push it for the pre-qualification. And this second dry port is in a place called 10th of Ramadan Industrial City, and this is their biggest industrial city in Egypt, and it's in the backyard of around 5 seaports at the Red Sea.
Okay, I think we may have lost Attar again. Can you hear me, Attar?
Yes, hear you well. So,
sorry, we lost you a little
this
bit.
is the second dry port.
Yeah, carry on.
This is the second dry port of the 10th of Ramadan, and we have another 5 dry ports in different places that will take place with be tendered out within the next 3 years. In this section of seaports, we have a seaport in, or actually a quay wall and section in the Alexandria port. Alexandria port is the biggest port in Egypt, and it's almost 60% of the trade is coming in or going through the Alexandria port. There's a new section for the dry bulks. We are starting the studies on it, something like next week or within 2 weeks, and we will expect to have it on the 2021 plan. In the sector of water, we can start with the desalination. The desalination is a big, ambitious plan. The Ministry of Housing and Utilities have a very big plan for the desalination within the next 5 years. They want to add something like around 2 million cubic meter per day within the next 5 years. This is a very big plan. As you can all know, that we are expanding in new developments and new cities in the North Coast or on the Red Sea, and the River Nile does not reach these areas. Given the challenges of the water scarcity that we have now, we cannot even make this streams reach these areas. So we're depending 100% on the desalination in this new urban developments. Plus, some of the existing areas on the coasts, Red Sea and the Mediterranean, will be also depending on the desalination rather than the normal potable water coming from the refined.
Okay, I think we've lost Attar again. I'll just wait for a few seconds to see if we recover him. Okay, so we've lost Attar for the moment. We will come back as soon as he comes back online. He's outlining a very detailed program there, which is very, very good information, and I thank him for that. I will move on to some questions. Whilst the panel have been talking, we've had a lot of questions that have come in. I'll go to those first. So a lot of them are around Saudi Arabia. So Hani, I don't know if you have seen them as they're coming in. I will go through them, and I don't know if you were able to answer them or not, but I will just put them to you. So what is the current status of the PPP manual released by the NCP about 2 years ago?
It's still applicable. We're updating it as we go along, because as everybody knows, PPPs is I guess it's a living mechanism. So we're updating a little bit here and there, but we still have the first release. It's available on our website, and it's being applied.
Okay, a second question for you, Hani, and as I said, everyone, or at least a few of the questions that have come in are for the Saudi market. Is it mandated for a company to be registered and qualified with the NCP before they can bid for a PPP project in Saudi Arabia? So is there some kind of standing pre-qualification process?
No. Each transaction, with each transaction, we go through a normal procurement process of an EOI, then an RFQ, then an RFP. Companies can follow that structure. So, and just to go back to one of the points that you brought up, and as to how to actually access the pipeline and find out about the transaction. One is to register on our website. The information is all available on our website. That's one. Two, we have an investor relations team that has a page on our website that I would encourage investors to actually register so that they can be included in our database, and they would receive the announcements for launch transactions, whether EOIs or RFQs. And we send out updates. But going back to your question, no, they don't have to be registered in Saudi in the initial stages, but once we get to the later stages, yes, they would have to be. Okay,
thank you very much. Now we have Attar has recovered, but thank you very much for your perseverance, Attar. You were talking about desalination, 2 million cubic meters a day capacity, I think it was, you said. What other sectors are you do you have in your pipeline? Oh, I think we may have lost you again. I tempted fate. Okay, David, I'll come to you whilst we try and recover Attar Hanura. David, the question that has come in, and I'm going to ask you this as a kind of, you're not country specific, but what are the success factors of what are the key factors of a successful PPP project? How do we judge the success? Is it about the performance KPIs? Is it about the relationships? What are the success factors that you would measure one by?
I suppose it depends which end of the telescope you're looking through. I mean, if you're the public sector, then I guess you want your policy objectives delivered, or the services that you want, you're seeking, you'd want those delivered. You'd want those delivered well, to a consistently high standard, and you'd want good value for money. So I think that's one of the success factors. From the other side of the fence, I guess you want, well, clearly to get a reasonable return for what you're doing, and to have a project that works well and functions well, and you have a good working relationship with the public sector.
Is it your view? So this region, and I think Hani talked about this, this region has had a lot of success in the electricity and water sector with IWPPs, going back into the 90s with IWPPs. And in my understanding, that's partly or largely because you've had sovereign guarantees for offtake of the output and feedstock pricing for the input. Are sovereign guarantees the way to, is that essential to make these things happen quickly, or is it not really sustainable to have that?
So is that directed at me?
Yeah, sorry, Dave, that was for you.
Yeah. So I think the answer to, well, clearly in those projects to which you're referring, clearly they're funded on the basis of the offtake agreement. So clearly having a stable offtake agreement with a strong counterparty at the end of it, that's very important. But if you go to sort of a vanilla project, if you like a hospital, then if your procuring authority is a strong, national Ministry of Health or something like that, then probably having a sovereign guarantee won't make much difference to that credit. So I don't think you do need one. If it's a smaller local, health authority, which doesn't really have a great deal of money and cannot stand behind the obligations, set out in the PPP agreement, then yes, I think some sort of government support, and I think by sovereign guarantee you really mean government support. Yeah. Then I think yes, that's essential, because if people don't have confidence in the party they're dealing with to pay sums should they need to be paid, then some sort of government support will be required.
Okay, so it's a question of as always, it's a question of it depends on the project, and
I think so, yeah.
Okay, we have Attar again. I'm going to try again to come to you, Attar. You were talking about desalination. If you could just go through other sectors.
Yes, in the desalination, we have already 4 projects that we're studying now, and there is another something like 16 projects to be studied and tendered out within the next 5 years. In the wastewater treatment plant, we have something like 30% of the wastewater treatment plants need to be either new green fields, or some of which need to be rehabilitated or to be rebuilt or expanded or upgraded. The third sector that we have projects in now, which is the schools. We have 1,000 schools. The first stage of the schools already finished, and these schools already into service for the educational year 2021. And we are tendering another 98 schools at the second phase. So within the next 2 years, we will reach the target of 1,000 schools on different.
If I can ask you a question on the schools, are you doing them as individual schools, or is it bundles of 10 or 50 or something?
No, we're doing them in small bundles of three of each, which are geographically near each other. So each bidder can apply on one group, one bundle, or 2 bundles, or 3 bundles, up to 4 bundles, up to 12 schools. That's his maximum. And the qualification or the pre-qualification for these guys, we've got 3 levels, up to 6 schools, up to 9 schools, up to 12 schools. So he can click and apply on which category that he can apply. This to make it much more wider for different capacities and different financial and operating capacities to participate. The fourth thing is the hospitals. You know that the hospitals and the schools, or the social sector in particular are the most sophisticated sectors in the PPPs. Now we are attacking again the hospitals, and now we're going to the so-called university hospitals, which are a hospital that is always attached to a school of medicine, to some of the universities. We are expanding new campus of Banha University, of Ain Shams University, in a place called Al-Abur, which is the outskirts of Cairo. This is a new campus. They are building a new medicine school of medicine, and the new hospital as well. It's almost 220 beds. So this school is under study, and we expect to have it back to market on the Q2 of 2021.
So fantastic! A fantastic pipeline. I'm sorry if I cut you off just now, but I wanted to ask: how do you structure these PPPs? Is every single one a bespoke, or is there a standard model that you're using where the government has a certain percentage? And how are you structuring the actual contracts?
Look, each, as I always say, that you can never have a cut and paste in a PPP project. PPP project, as Mr. David Moore just mentioned, and Mr. Hani, that each project have its own characteristics, and each project could be restructured in different structure. I mean, you can have, for instance, a toll road, and this could be either under a PFI system or under a revenue share or a BOT system, okay, depending on the number of ridership and cars going on there. If this is a busy one, then you can go on so the demand is guaranteed, and you don't need to have a demand guaranteed to the private sector. In this case, you can structure it under a revenue sharing and a BOT system. But if this is the new road leading to a new development, new urban development, that you need people to start going there, so you might not be putting any tolls at the few years for the next few years, then you can structure this project under a PFI. So the circumstances of each project differs from one place to another.
Okay. Sorry again to interrupt. I have a question for you here that somebody has asked, where can they obtain Egypt's PPP pipeline list? Is there a website or some location where they can find this information?
Actually, we have a website. However, the website now we are upgrading it and uploading a new interactive website, so they can contact us directly.
I think we've lost you again, Attar.
.gov.eg.
Sorry, Attar, can you repeat that just at the key moment? We lost you a little bit there. If you could repeat the contact details.
To contact us and get you the last update, the website is now upgraded and updated, so we have an interval of 2 weeks that the website will not be working because it's under construction. But you can contact us directly under my email, which is Attar, ATTER, @mof.gov.eg.
Okay, so what we will do, Attar, we will circulate that email, if you're comfortable with us circulating to people who are attending, so that if people want to know or ask you questions about the pipeline, they can email you, and we will make that email address available.
Yes, they can email me, they can call me on my cell phone anytime of the day. Okay.
You might regret saying that. We have a lot of people joining us today.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. One final question for you, Attar. Now, Egypt is one of the strong growth markets at the moment, but just not very long ago we had some currency crisis issues, and there was a lot of foreign investors were nervous about investing in the Egypt market. What is the attitude, or what are the concerns that foreign investors raise with you, and how are you addressing those?
Look, Egypt in the last few years, we suffered some political instability and economical instability due to the revolutions that we have in 2011 and 2013, which has an impact a few years after that. Recently, and in end of 2016, November 2016, we had the flotation of the Egyptian pound, or liberalization of the Egyptian pound. This was another thing. However, starting 2017 and 18, this flotation of the Egyptian pound actually dropped down a lot of obstacles, of financial obstacles that we used to face before that, like the repatriation of the profits, like the availability of dollars or hard currency, the exchange rate, the foreign exchange rate risk, which you have more than one exchange rate in the country, which is another high risk. Actually, after this flotation, this 3 or 4 financial obstacle was not there. Always the private sector is always seeking for a sovereign guarantee, which we provide. And actually, this is in the law, in the PP law that we have, in Article 35, that the PP projects have a sovereign guarantee. Definitely, the sovereign guarantee is not for all projects, but it's for the projects that the government is the off-taker. The government is paying to the private sector, like the power stations, like the desalination, the wastewater treatment plant, and so on. But some other projects where the demand risk and the collections are on the lap of the private sector, where the private sector gives the service and takes the fees against the service, then there's no payment done. Accordingly, there is no sovereign guarantee. However, there is another kind of a guarantee that we, in these cases with the no payments from the government, it's only restricted or only limited to the termination. In case of termination and the government takes the asset, the government pays. There is a guarantee for the banks and for the financing institute to step in. The government steps into this direct agreement, direct financial agreements, and start paying the banks or paying the financial institutes the payments according to the financial statements or the financial agreements in case of termination.
Okay, thank you, Attar. That's very clear information and very good. Thank you very much for that. I'm now going to, we're coming towards the end of our time slot, so I'm going to go through some of the questions for people. If I don't get to ask everybody's questions, I will circulate the questions with the panelists afterwards. Mahmoud, if I can come to you, we have a question here. Now, you mentioned that oh, hang on, my question has just jumped. Give me a second. You mentioned that the government doesn't have the capacities it requires in some instances. Are there skills and behaviors needed to build long-term relationships in place? So I think what the questioner is asking is about where are your gaps? You're on mute.
Gap. No, I'm okay, I think, now.
Yeah, I can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically, yes, every government in the region has capacity building gaps, and we are working on that. There is a training program in place. There is a very important agreement with multilateral institutions. We call it Project Preparation Development Facility. This is largely designed with the IFC, with the EBRD, with the World Bank, with the AIIB. Those PPDFs are designed to provide support, and this support is split basically typically to about 80% goes to transaction advisory fees. So we have the allocations for advisors. Maybe some 15% goes to pre-feasibilities and environmental and social impact studies. And we have maybe the remaining 5% going to training and capacity building. So we do have the tools in place. We do have, in fact, in Jordan, a rich history of PPPs, but we're done individually without following a law. But we're basically each project, like we have 33 power projects, 6 conventional and 27 renewables that were done in the past 7-8 years. Were basically done through a special procurement committee. And we had a problem with them today because most of them did not have a strong transaction advisors on behalf of the government. That's why we re-emphasizing the importance of transaction advisors as an important defenders of what the government is aiming to achieve from these projects.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Hani, if I can come to you, and I apologize if the topics are jumping around. I'm just following the questioning now. So for Saudi Arabia, what is the NCP's view in relation to the role and participation of international banks versus Saudi banks in the transactions? Are there any sort of requirements for local financing versus international? You are on mute.
Sorry about that. Didn't notice that. Well, as far as the financing goes, we welcome both local and international banks to participate in the transactions. And actually, in some of the transactions that have closed over the last, I guess, year and a half or so, international finance or financing from international banks has reached above 70%. But on the, I think someone was asking about the supplier, also about the supplier.
Yeah.
We do have a local content requirement, depending on the type of transaction. So it could be from 40% and above. But that would be on, and like Arthur and David said, it's indicated. It's not a cookie cutter recipe. It's not one size fits all.
So the local content requirement that relates to the input in terms of people and materials and supplies.
Correct.
And it depends. It varies according to the project sector, but it doesn't apply to the financing. Is that correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Verify that. I mean, I can verify that, but not to my knowledge. I don't think the financing is restricted.
Okay. And then there's one other question here for you, Hani, about the PPP manual that we talked about a moment ago. Is that accessible on the NCP website?
Yes, it is. And there was another question about the pipeline. I was just about to put in the address of where they can actually see the pipeline. It's on our website. It's under something called the Investor Portal. I know we're running short of time. Just one last addition is, as far as advisory capacity goes, we're always looking for advisory capacity. So I would encourage all the advisors out there that are interested to work with us to visit our website. We'll be adding they can contact us through through the emails that are on there. But we'll also be adding a page for specifically for advisory capacity, technical, financial, legal, and all those.
That's fantastic. Now, if anyone wants to follow up on any of the comments from Hani or any of the other speakers, whether you want to make contact or find information, please feel free to email us, or you can submit your request on the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. And Hani, I think, just said he will put on a link there for the manual there. But you can, if you're having difficulty, you can use MEED to sort of help join the dots as best we can. Now, Attar, I hope you can hear me clearly. We have a question here. Okay, you've maybe answered this already, but it says, this is great news for PPP in Egypt, but for the pipeline, can you give us some information about size and timing? Now, I think you've done quite a lot of that already. Maybe if you can just, if you direct, or do you have a general comment on size and timing?
Size of the projects, you mean?
I think that's what it means, yes.
Yeah. Size, if we're talking about the wastewater treatment plants, we have 190,000 cubic meter per day, and this is a big one. And the size of that is almost $190 million, or $150 to $170 million. We have another three with a range of 50 to 70,000 each. That's smaller size. The dry ports, we have the first dry port with already awarded and signed. It's almost $130 million worth of investment. The second one will be a little bit bigger because it's not only a dry port, which is in 10th of Ramadan city. It's a dry port and a logistic area, which will be almost $200 million worth of investment. The hospital, the initial studies that we have now says that this hospital, the capital investment is almost like $70 million. We have another project that's undersizing now. It's under studies. I can add like.
Okay, I think we've just dropped off there again with Attar. I think we're running out of time anyway, so I'm going to bring the session to a close. As I mentioned, if you have follow-up questions or comments, please feel free to submit them in the chat box here. And if the panelists are still around for the rest of today, they can answer directly, or alternatively, we can circulate the questions and get make the contact, that's the point of this event today, to help people with the contact. But I'm going to have to bring this session to a close because we've just simply run out of time. It's been a fantastic session. It's provided us with a sort of a regional snapshot with some key markets covered, and some general statements. So thank you to Engineer Attar Hanura from the Ministry of Finance PPP unit in Egypt. Thank you to Mahmoud Al-Koshman, who is the advisor to the Prime Minister and head of the PPP program in Jordan. Thank you to David Moore, who is a partner at CMS covering projects and infrastructure and the managing partner in Abu Dhabi. And thank you very much to Hani Al-Saik, who is the Director General for Strategic Communications and Marketing at the National Centre for Privatization in Saudi Arabia.